It is Friday, January 3rd. Let's talk PlayStation. Okay, probably going to be another long one, so bear with me. December's PS Plus games as a reminder: Titanfall 2 and Monster Energy Supercross. Not much time left to grab these. January's titles have been announced. It is the Uncharted Collection and Goat Simulator. Another not great month, Uncharted being the spectrum we've been talking about before, where it can't be too bad and it actually can't be too good, because Uncharted, fantastic franchise, but it's been on PS3, PS4. You can commonly grab the collection for $10, $15, so a lot of people already have this. Goat Simulator, I think, is actually pretty suitable here. It's a game that is very fun, very enjoyable, but due to the nature of it, I can see why people might not have wanted to spend money on it, but it's totally worth playing for free. So, yeah, not a great month for PS Plus once again. Now, before we get to the main bulk topics of the show, we have two small ones to go over. First one being from, this came out on Friday right after I uploaded Let's Talk PlayStation last week. But Sony's Shuhei Yoshida said in an interview that developers have been telling him that PS5 is the easiest console they've ever developed for. This is not the first time we've heard this, so that bodes well that PS5 still has the same vision and focus that PS4 did, where it was developer-driven. Sony talked openly with developers about what they wanted. They went for ease of development, and it's good that they have capitalized on that further. We also got an update on the Final Fantasy VII Remake demo from last week. We know the data is on the PlayStation Store. Well, now somebody has pulled the entire demo off the store. It's about 22 gigabytes big, an hour long, so a very meaty demo. We still haven't heard when it's actually going to go live for everybody. Square Enix hasn't said anything. The game's coming out in a few months, so you would hope that this demo will actually drop soon. But anyway, with that out of the way, we can talk about the PS5 stuff. We'll start with this CES 2020. Normally, I wouldn't have even brought this up. However, some interesting developments have happened regarding this. So if you don't know, CES 2020, the Consumer Electronics Show, happens every year in Las Vegas. It's a massive show floor. Sony's there every year, just like tons of tech companies. But it's just, well, for general technology, consumer electronics, nothing gaming related, really. Sony, for example, seldom talks about PlayStation at CES, so it's never a show that we look at or even really ever care about. Sony goes there to show cameras, TVs, stuff like that. It's weird. CES is often a place where you don't even see products coming out next year. You see concept technologies that don't come out for another 4, 5, 10 years. You're probably going to see a lot of 8K, 16K, 24K televisions at CES this year. That's how far out they are. And some stuff that you'll never actually see come to fruition. But anyway, Sony on their website, at sony.com, it says, see the future at CES 2020. They have a conference January 6th. Not a big deal. We're not expecting PlayStation stuff like always. However, the recent development here is that, well, we know Cory Barlog from Sony Santa Monica is going. Okay, well, Push Square posted an article about CES 2020 and speculating if it's a PS5 reveal, which I thought was a bit weird that they would suggest that. However, when they tweeted that article out, Cory Barlog liked that tweet. So now there's some speculation that maybe we'll get something. Then there was a Pastebin post on December 31st, a very minor post, but it basically said there's a AAA game there, a PS5 reveal, and that's it really. It's like 2 lines of text, nothing big. So what will actually happen? Now, I'll tell you right now, we're not going to get a major PS5 reveal at CES. Absolutely out of the question. There's no hype, there's no pre-release, there's no media invites going out. We're not hearing anything about Mark Cerny or anybody else going over to the show. Something that substantial would have its own event. But at the very least, I'll go as far to say, maybe we'll see something in the same veins of what we've seen with actually Spider-Man being demoed on PS5, where maybe you'll get a very short, small technical demo of God of War running on PlayStation 5 hardware. Cory Barlog talks about what's possible on the platform. A very short little, 5-10 minute demonstration. Maybe we'll get technical specifications, but even that might be a bit of a stretch, and that would be saved for when Mark Cerny wants to talk about the platform. But maybe he might even be there. We still have a few days until it gets closer to the event. But as far as I will go to say, maybe that's what we'll get. There's also previous years where I believe Sony demoed like Gran Turismo on some of their televisions. But again, it's always the consumer electronic portion. It's never really about the game, so I wouldn't put any stock in this just yet. We'll keep our eyes peeled on it. Again, it's Monday, so if anything major PS5 happens, I'll either tweet about it, or if it's more significant, we'll do a video. Now, moving on to an update from last week's news story about PS5 potentially being 9.2 teraflops. This, of course, created a pretty big conversation over on Twitter, Reset Era, Reddit, my video, a lot of other videos. A lot going on. This got picked up by some more mainstream media, so more people are aware about it and talking about it. And again, it's going against everything we've heard about PS5 so far for the last year. year, that it's around 12 to 13 teraflops. It's a very powerful piece of kit. The dev kit's around 13 teraflops, which, keep in mind, dev kit's always a little bit over-spec'd, so the retail hardware will be a little bit under that. That's just typical in the console industry. But then there's the question of, well, teraflop is a number that's not very reliable, and that's very true, especially given that we don't know if it's GCN architecture, if it's RDNA, RDNA2. There's still the die size that's up for debate. And then, well, the actual information at hand from last week. Remember, this was just a data mine from GitHub. It was the AMD testing the Oberon codename, which that's the PlayStation 5 Silicon. We know that much. Not that it's completely confirmed, but with most certainty, it's PS5 Silicon, and there's 3 clock speeds in there. We know that one's for playing PS4 software, one's for PS4 Pro software. Well, it's PS4 software that has a PS4 Pro enhancement, and then you would presume that the top one was PlayStation 5, and that's how we can figure out the 9.2 teraflop number. And so, but that's the thing. There's no context there, and this isn't really. There's still no new information regarding this. There's no reference to ray tracing, which we know hardware accelerated ray tracing is in the PlayStation 5. So if that's either something that's also on the die that Sony's doing in a more custom manner, we do have a timestamp now. Apparently, this data that was pulled was from like June or July, somewhere around there. But that's not really great information to go on either, because it's still somewhat silly to me that people want to go on about how Sony could up the ante, or so could Microsoft, and they're very reactionary. Some things you just can't change, guys. This is a multi-million-dollar thing. There's R&D, there's contracts in place. Some things there's just no steer, and you can't change within an 8 to 9, 10 month, even a year period. Some things are pretty much locked in with all parties at play. So I'm not saying that 9.2 teraflops is what PlayStation 5 is going to ship with, but timestamps just don't really help in this manner when it comes to what's actually going to be powering these things. Sometimes you can take things in and out of the retail box a little bit prior, so that is a thing, but not what's powering the machine. So again, there's not much to update here. Really, some people that have some of the insiders that have been discussing the teraflop rating beforehand, that have been discussing where PlayStation 5 sits in terms of power, have pretty much doubled down on, well, this data not accurate, this is what we've been hearing, and this is what we're sticking to. Klee Game Fan, I think, said, I'm just staying back and watching all this, pretty much implying that he's not wrong in stating that PS5 is around where it's supposed to be. It's a very powerful console. Jason Schreier, pretty level-headed here too. He's just stating, look, I don't know if one's more powerful than the other, and quite frankly, it's not going to matter that much. They're very similar. We may not even know after we get full specifications, because, and this is what I've been talking about a bit before as well, which, there's certain specialized things at play here that from a development perspective we don't really know or completely understand right now. It's just a lot of barking from all corners of the internet in regards to where people fall on this, but point blank, we don't have any context, we don't have any hard data. We just still have people that previously known things sticking to what they've been saying. They just hear that PlayStation 5 very powerful, very similar to X Series X. A few had gone on record to say PS5 had the slight edge, but even like I've been echoing on this channel for a little bit now, pretty irrelevant. Even if X Series X is a little better or PS5 a little better, doesn't make nearly as much of a difference as you might think. Now, a lot of the guys that are watching here, you're PlayStation fans. I get it. You want PS5 to be more powerful. It's going to be your chosen platform. If you watch videos like these, or like the Digital Foundry one, they also posted a pretty good recap of this as well, then you're into that kind of stuff, right? You care about the performance. You care about it showing off fantastic and beautiful games. But some people really need to separate this idea from their mindset to what this is really going to be, which is not exactly very meaningful to your mass market consumer. The kind of person that goes out and buys Call of Duty and FIFA every year, maybe a few other first-party games, this, that, and the other. This is just not... It's not as substantial as one would think, especially if they're going to be as similar as what we're hearing right now. We just like to talk about these things because it's fun, and certainly it's exciting when we have a new platform launch and we get to talk about these numbers. But it's important to wait until we have something to go on. Otherwise, we're just speaking into the void, trying to be right about something that you couldn't possibly be right about until we know for certain what something is or isn't, right? And on that note, like last week when I was theorizing, just humoring it, if that was to be true, where it was that large of a power disparity, that would actually put Sony at a lower price point, which would be a bit of a surprise. We're all expecting $499 for both systems. Truthfully, I'm still expecting that, but if it was, for example, that much of a power disparity, that's a lower manufacturing cost for Sony, that potentially means a cheaper box, which creates a different market scenario. But even then, I want to see when Lockhart comes in. I'm actually, at this point, really dying to see how Microsoft conveys that, shows that box off, if it is true, which probably is, considering what we've been hearing about so far from very good sources. We also do have a potential codename for Lockhart, which is Sparkman, I believe. I think that was the codename that was pulled from AMD, but it seems like Lockhart at some point is going to come in. How does Microsoft convey that and show that off? You know, that is much weaker than, say, what we've been hearing about with PlayStation 5. Even at 9.2 teraflops, Lockhart's around 4 something on RDNA 2, presumably, or RDNA. So that box could be sold around $349, $299 if Microsoft wants to take that much of a loss on it, but I think that creates an even more interesting market scenario. So there's a lot of unknowns, and we won't have to wait that much longer. We're in the current year that PlayStation 5 and X Series X will be released. Hold out a few more weeks and we'll probably get some more concrete information that we can really go on and have better conversations about what could or could not happen. But to say that power is the be-all, end-all thing that guarantees market share is not true. Moving on to our next one. I wasn't going to talk about this, however, it's picked up a bit of traction, and now some of you are sending me this on Twitter, so I think it'd be weird if I don't acknowledge it. And I wasn't going to talk about it because this started off as pretty ridiculous, but also I've just talked about it so many times. Anyway, the news story is Hip Hop Gamer over on YouTube had gone on record to state that there is a remastering engine coming to PlayStation 5 that will play PS1, 2, 3, obviously 4 games. We know that's confirmed, but PS1, 2, and 3, a remastering engine. So you can play all the games backwards compatible, and they're even a little bit better. They're remastered, the reason why this is ridiculous is just the way he described it in the video. It's not like I'm not trying to start conflict here, but rather he didn't necessarily explain it the right way. I'm not necessarily saying his source is wrong, assuming he has one. It's just one of those things where he kind of didn't really explain it properly because it's emulation, and I mean, this is a thing. I mean, it certainly this is what Microsoft does with Xbox One currently, with 360 and original Xbox games. You know, it's via disk. You can put a disk in there. You get access to the game. You get a higher frame rate, higher resolution. That's certainly the case. It's just how he explained it in the video. Didn't sound very confident. Let's just put it that way. Now, the thing is, we've talked about so many times now how very highly speculative. It's just the only thing we've actually gone on in terms of straight fact is that there are patents that Sony has registered. Mark Cerny is the inventor of emulation, a bunch of different methods for emulation. And so what I've always theorized is that in the background, Sony's working on some sort of emulation for potentially PlayStation 5 that would be for PS1, 2, and even boldly PlayStation 3, but it wouldn't be something that we'd get on day one. I don't think that's going to happen. It may never happen, just due to the complexity of PlayStation 3, for example. Now, there's a slight update here in that somebody had sent this to the Twitter account that initially leaked the very clearest PS5 dev kit images that we've ever seen so far. So we already know this person has access of some sort. They followed up by stating 100% fake, but Sony does have some plans for backwards compatibility beyond PS4. In a follow-up tweet, he said, let's just say PS Now isn't going anywhere. So that tweet is a bit suspect to me, because PlayStation Now immediately disqualifies the traditional sense of revisiting PS1, 2, and 3 games because of, well, not PS3 because there's plenty of PS3 games on PS Now, but more PS2 and PS1 games. That's licensing. The big problem with backwards compatibility is how it is handled. System on a chip being you're putting the actual hardware baked into the new hardware, so it's native play. You pretty much get full compatibility. And you don't have any legal liability with any licensing regarding all the software that's being played. It's just retroactive, meaning Sony's not reselling you any PS1, PS2 games, or even PS3 at all whatsoever. If you have the disc, it just plays natively. That's like what Nintendo does a lot pretty often with a lot of their generations, where usually they let you play the outgoing one natively. Now, they didn't do that with Switch, but you know what I mean. Then there's software emulation. This is on a software level. It's much more complicated, much more difficult. There's a lot of compatibility issues, but the software can be manipulated, so you can get higher frame rate, higher resolution. This is what PlayStation 3 did when it initially launched. Every single PS3 model has PS1 emulation. It initially had system-on-a-chip PS2, so that's hardware-based. Then PS3 80GB had PS2 software emulation. That was later removed, but that was PS2 software emulation. Again, there's no, with that, there's no licensing problems whatsoever. Every disc will go in and play. Again, you might have compatibility issues, might have some performance hiccups, but there's no legal liability to make sure that those games each are individually licensed. We all know that that's a tall order to fill. That wouldn't happen for the vast libraries of PS1 and PS2. So moving forward with PlayStation 5, what does this look like? I use Xbox One as a great example because Microsoft handled it in a much different manner, where they are licensing and curating those titles. Each game is licensed. It goes through a QA process, certification process. This is why the original Xbox games, part of the backwards compatibility program over there, it's like, what, 25, 30 games? It's not much. It's not much at all. And I often find it a bit unfair to say, oh, with X Series X you can go back 4 generations. You can play 4 generations of Xbox. That's awesome and technically true, but when you get to the first Xbox, I mean, it just does that really count? That's like PlayStation Now, where you say you can stream PS2, PS3, and PS4 games, and you can download the PS2 and PS4 games. There's like 15 PS2 games on there. And that's what Sony does with PS4. With the PS2 games on PS4. That's the same manner that Microsoft does it. Those games go through a license process again. That's why there's trophy support. That's why they're up-res. The only difference with Sony is that they want to charge you for those games. And to be honest, I theorize that's why Microsoft went the curated route and not the, say, Sony route, like system on a chip or full emulation, where just bring the disc and you're fine. The reason why Microsoft probably didn't do that and instead did a curated relicensing list is so that, sure, if you have the disc, you can play that, but they are relicensed, so they can be resold. That's why when you go to a store, you can see a 360 game that has actually an Xbox One label and box art on it, because they can see a bit of a return on that. They do, keep in mind, Microsoft, that's a huge undertaking to do that emulation program, to do backwards compatibility again. So they want to see the returns. They're not just going to literally put millions of dollars in manpower and resources into that feature and have no way to quantify it into a return, because clearly they weren't selling that many Xbox Ones to begin with. So they probably figured, well, at the very least, at the end of this road, let's allow each game to be monetizable again. Otherwise, if they either monetize the games or they don't. You know what I mean? That's the ultimatum here. So they chose the monetization route. You either monetize the games and have to go through licensing every single individual title, or you don't license the games, but everything's like available, assuming that you build a proper emulator that works and you get good compatibility all around. Okay? That said, sorry that was long. I don't even really care about the original rumor or what Hip Hop Gamer is saying. Just that, you know, with what we've said here, I still think it's something that Sony has interest in and is working on behind the scenes. Mark Cerny being attached to those patents is pretty telling. Now, could it reference PS4 backwards compatibility? Potentially. It just seems like, look at the history here. They do have emulators for PS1. We know PS4 has a working PS2 emulator. The real big problem here is PlayStation 3. Everyone likes to reference our PCS3 on PC, that it's making great strides and PS3 games are getting reverse engineered and they're getting better and better. I always think it's actually a good example of why it just isn't going to happen with PlayStation 4 and even possibly PlayStation 5, because it is just so complicated and there's such a problem with compatibility. But to play against that, Sony, well, they engineered the PlayStation 3. They can bring back all these people from IBM. They can source the people that they need. They've got all their documentation. They know the PlayStation 3 better than anybody, so they can certainly build the best emulator possible and not all these outside people that are just playing a guessing game and doing a lot of this heavy lifting to make it work, right? If anybody could do it with the right amount of horsepower, given PS5 could be that staple of having enough horsepower, it would be Sony. So that's about it. Yeah, the tweet response stating PS Now is not going anywhere, that kind of says like, oh yeah, PS Now is going to be the answer for PS1 and more PS2 games, but no, that ain't going to work because you got to license them again. And you can get like barely any PS1 games on there. We see the effort they've done with PS2. I would think that's not really a viable option. If it is, I would be disappointed if that's what Sony's going to pursue, because that means you just get trickle-fed a bunch of PS1 and PS2 games for the whole PS5 life cycle. I would much rather them go the full emulator route and just bring your disc and it's fine. But like I said, you can't really, like the Microsoft example, you can't quantify that to sales. How do you really say that that's going to, benefit you in the long run, especially because all the data that we have suggests that backwards compatibility, as great of a feature as it is, it just doesn't, not many people use it, and it's the truth. So it's still a pipe dream. I, more than anybody else, would love a PlayStation that plays 5 generations of consoles and there's no real major hiccups or issues in most games play, but I know it's a bit of a pipe dream. But I will always stay on this channel. There's something going on behind the scenes. I just don't know if Sony's going to follow through with it. Okay, that was long. We'll do this one real quick because who cares? The Uncharted movie lost another director. I don't even know who was attached to it. He's gone. So this movie's never coming out. Let's go to Let's Talk Plus. The weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I'd like to congratulate this user right here. You've won. I'll send you your code very shortly. I'll contact you soon on Twitter or email. If you would like to win a $10 PlayStation Network code, I do this every single week here, every Friday on Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm trying to pay for your games. If you would like to win a $10 code, follow the link down below to the Gleam website. Supporting this channel, a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week. Those are all the news stories I want to talk about you all from this past week. We did a unboxing on Tuesday, some PS Vita and PSP knockoff devices I found on Wish.com when I was searching for some PS4 accessories. They're hilariously bad, but also I think there's a use case for them. And that'll be the last unboxing we have for probably a month or so. So we'll do some more later on, as always, but we'll take a break on those, and I'll do more discussion topics. Follow on Twitter at Mystic Ryan so we can see what we're doing on Monday, if Sony does something, if it warrants a video, or if not. Sometimes there's a Q&A involved there where I ask for some questions. You know how it is, but that's it. That concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Becker. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.